Good afternoon. Welcome to, I'd like the first motion to open.
I make a motion that we open this meeting of the Board of Architecture Review and Historic Preservation on February 26, 2018.
Motion by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor. Susan?
Aye.
Susan, Christina?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And Rob? Aye. Welcome to the February 26th meeting of the Architectural Board of Review and Historic Preservation. My name is Curtis. I'd like to introduce our panel for this evening. We'd like to welcome Jeff Broadleib, Susan Stevenson, Christina Redding, and I'd like to also welcome and introduce for the first time Robert Coburn. Well, welcome to our board to help complete the five-panel board now, and feel comfortable and confident that they'll do a great job. We also have our historic consultant, Zach Studenroth, our legal counsel, Bill Robinson, Antoinette, as always, as well as Charlie. We welcome you. You probably see that the agenda is a little changed, a little different in terms of the format. We felt that it would be a better flow for the evening. Just a couple of housekeeping rules before we can proceed. If you do need to speak to one another, please take it in the hallway. It interferes with our opportunity to hear those that are speaking before the podium. We also ask that you please be courteous, and if you have your phones, not necessarily turning them off, but if you could put them on vibrate or silent so that at least it wouldn't interfere with our opportunity, again, to see who to listen to whoever is speaking this evening. If you have plans, lay them flat on the table, have them facing this board, so Charlie can pick up all information for the records. All right, so we're going to start this evening's meeting with first minutes from February 12th, 2018. Did everyone have the opportunity to review? Yes. Any questions, comments, concerns, errors, or revisions? All right, I understand you were not here, so you'll be abstained from this one. So the motion would be to approve the minutes from February 12th, 2018.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from February 12, 2018.
Motion by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. We're going to move forward to our signs for this evening. And first application, if we can call out the name of the applicant.
Zachary T. Clanahan, architect.
Is the applicant present?
Yes.
Your name for the record, please.
Zachary T. Clanahan?
Okay. This is going to be a contractor sign on the lot that you're working on?
Yes.
It'll be a temporary sign that will be there just during the construction, and it'll be removed when the home is complete, correct?
Correct.
If you can explain to us the color of the background and the lettering itself. What color is the background?
It's just a light, like ash gray with white lettering.
Okay. Name of the company. You have a small print underneath there, the telephone number, your website, along with the name of your corporation.
Yes.
Correct? Board members, do you have any issues with the sign as proposed? Jeff?
I think it's handsome.
Susan?
Very stylish.
Christina?
Nope, I think it's handsome.
Any public comment on the application? Motion to approve.
I make a
Thank you.
motion that we approve the architect sign for Zachary Clanahan.
Motion by Christina. It's been seconded by Susan. All in favor?
Aye.
Christina? Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Rob?
Aye.
Curtis is aye as well. Next application, please.
Next application is Louis Follow Custom Homes, application for a sign.
Is the applicant present?
Yes, hi.
That goes back in the
This is
folder.
also a contractor sign?
Yes,
All right, your name for the record.
Louis Follow.
It's blue background, white lettering?
Right.
Is your sign? I'm holding it up.
Put it on the table if you could.
Okay. You have it there? Can you put it flat? All right. Contractor sign will be on the site of the property that you'll be working on?
Yes.
Will be removed once the home is complete.
Correct.
All right. Board members, do you have any questions, issues, or concerns?
Good looking
Jeff?
sign?
Susan?
No.
Chris? Rob? Is there any public comment on the application? Then motion to approve?
Make a motion that we approve the contractor sign for Louis Follow Custom Homes.
Motion by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor. Rob?
Aye.
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Susan? Jeff?
Aye.
And I'm as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next application,
Next application is Chic Beauty Studio, application for a sign.
the Beauty Studio.
Hi,
Hi. Your name for the record, please.
Sandra Correa.
Okay. You have a sign that's going on the building itself?
Yes, it was approved before.
You changed the color, right?
Last time that I came here, but it's just that I didn't realize that when it was the sign right there, the little letters was legible, the brown lashes and hair. So
Below
I,
line.
What you're adding is Lash, hair, and brown?
Big, because the previous one was very little, and the logo.
I believe it was on there previously, but it was so small that it couldn't really be
Yes.
seen even from the
And I
sidewalk.
add chic inside the logo.
Okay, so you want to increase the lettering so you can have more visibility? We're going to question the board to see if they have any issue with you increasing the sign. Sometimes it tends to look more billboardish. Less is more, but we'll see how the board looks at the sign and see if there's any issues. Jeff, any issues with increasing the
No,
lettering?
it's relatively innocuous.
Okay. Susan?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay. Christina?
Fine.
I'm fine as well.
Any public comment on the application? No other additions, no other lighting, nothing else,
Nothing
just the
else,
lettering being
just the
increased?
letter.
Motion to approve.
Make a motion that we approve the sign for Chic Beauty Studio.
Motion by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor. Rob?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
And Curtis, aye as well. Thank you. That concludes our sign permits for this evening. We have written decision by council. All outstanding written decisions. Council? First application.
Let's go through this one at a time, since I was not at the last meeting and believe I have everything right, but to double check it.
Okay.
So the first one is One Pond Lane, decision in the file approving the demolition of the building. Therefore, an affirmative vote on that motion will to be approve demolishment.
The motion on the table would be to approve written decision by council for the certificate of appropriateness to demolish One Pond Lane. Is the motion?
I make a motion that we approve the written decision by council referring to One Pond Lane LLC and Hogwarts.
Motion by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor. Susan?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Jeff?
Nay.
Nay. And I'm an aye as well. You were not part of the application, so
Correct.
just abstaining. Next application, please.
This is an application to approve the proposed two-story house as amended. Therefore, an affirmative vote on the motion will be for approval.
Motion would be to approve the written decision by council for 81 Little Plain Road.
I make a motion that we approve the written decision by council for David Poulin at 81 Little Plains Road.
Motion by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor. Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well, and there's some abstaining. Next application, please.
This is a pair of driveway gates. An affirmative vote on the motion will be to approve the gates.
Motion to approve written decision by council for 436 Gin Lane,
I
driveway
make a
gates.
motion that we approve the written decision by council for House Ewing Lodge LLC on Gin Lane.
Motion by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor. Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Okay, fine. Abstain for,
Per row, yeah.
and the last application for written decision.
5 Chimneys, this is an application to approve the extension and alterations of a historic asset. The affirmative vote on the motion will be to approve the application as submitted.
Motion to approve written decision by council for 471 Hill Street.
I make a motion that we approve the written decision by council for 5 Chimneys CH LLC at 471 Hill Street.
Motion by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor. Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well.
And I'm an abstain.
That concludes our written decisions for this evening. First application
Want one?
for,
Can I get a copy of that?
yes.
Just give me something. It doesn't,
It's okay.
that's not it, is it?
There's an extra one in the file.
Yeah, here.
Rob.
Right, here, you take this one.
That's paperwork.
Press.
First application for driveway gates.
There's one application for driveway gates. This is 4 Squabble Lane.
Is the applicant present?
This is Ian Hamback, the Guardia Design for the applicant. Copies of the So drawings were submitted in advance for this agenda item and then updated today. The difference is subtle. Initially, the members were 2x2 pieces of mahogany with a 2-inch gap to achieve the 50% transparency that the board is typically seeking. We modified the sizing of the slats to 1.5 inches and the gap is now 1.5 inches as well, maintaining the 50% transparency. The design is essentially the same.
Do I have the revised plans in here showing those dimensions?
I believe so. They were submitted to the village
What day?
today.
Okay, plans, let's take a look. Are there any other plans?
So the slats are mahogany,
They are unfinished.
so unfinished?
And the piers?
The piers are going to be black powder-coated steel, but they're going to be recessed into the hedge, so you really won't see those.
I don't have the revised plans. Plans I have were received on the 23rd of February.
Oh, okay.
Do you have two sets of plans?
Only one, unfortunately.
We will need two sets for final approval.
Okay. Could I bring those at the next hearing?
Let's talk over the aesthetics now and see
Sure.
what the consensus are, if you're going to come back to the next meeting. Thank you for describing the actual material that's being used. What's the height of the gates?
So the gates are 8 feet tall. Oh, you know what? I apologize, 7 feet tall.
That's what the plan said.
You said the pillars will be recessed into the,
Yeah, the hedge is going to grow around the pillars and ensconce them. You're not even going to see those.
any type of projectile lighting or lighting plan or anything?
No.
Simple, the gates, 7 feet.
Correct.
Over 50% transparency, correct? I
Exactly.
wish you had just another set of plans.
Yes.
I think we would have no issue to challenge with the application submitted. Council, if he takes one of the sets here to amend it, you're the...
I'm the landscape
You're
architect.
licensed architect on
Yeah.
the file.
Yeah, I could mark that up.
It's such a small minute, I don't think two sets of plans for something this minor, making him, or allowing him to write on the plans what the dimensions and the gapping is now, maybe even offer up that one set of plans. I think that would be sufficient on our part, and I'll see if the board has an issue.
I actually have a question about the piers, because they seem enormous. They're taller than the 7-foot gate, is that correct?
They're not, no, they align to the top of the 7-foot gate. These are actually,
those are
this may be misleading, this is privet hedge.
Oh,
Yeah, this is the pier.
now we're talking.
Yeah.
They're recessed in the
I
hedge.
have no questions then.
Okay, great.
Is this non-historic?
It's not historic.
Yeah,
Right. Is there any reason why the chairman can't stop by tomorrow or authorize another member of the board to sign the original
I
tomorrow?
can sign.
Christina can.
That'd be okay?
Okay.
I apologize for the inconvenience on that.
Can you offer up that set there and bring it in?
Yeah, absolutely.
And tomorrow, another set will be presented to
There's
the...
3 there now.
Okay.
Yeah,
But they're not the accurate ones.
they are.
Oh.
They're all updated. We dropped those off this morning.
Okay.
So,
All right, so there should be no more, yeah, maybe,
Approve the application and authorize Christina to sign the
I can sign.
okay.
plans.
All right, board members, I'm sorry, is there any public discussion on the application? Motion to approve?
Make a motion that we approve the driveway gates from Forest Bub Lane.
Motion by Christina, is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan, all in favor, Rob? Aye. Susan?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Jeff? Aye. I'm an aye as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can pass me that and I'll put it on there.
Yeah.
You can sign that one.
Sorry. Driveway gates, we'll go on to our non-historic applications. The first application was referred to the Board of Appeals on its pending decision. Has there been any update or on the...
Now Mr. Bennett's going to submit an application. I've yet to write the letter, but I will tomorrow or
okay.
next time.
That's okay. Yeah, you'll remember you were going to write a letter to the Zoning Board of Appeals recommending that they consider a front yard variance so that the length of the house isn't as long as it would otherwise have been. So we're just still waiting for that letter. Thank you.
So at this time, we will adjourn pending the letter from council. Motion to adjourn?
I make a motion that we...
Why don't you adjourn it to the
Even though it's going to the
first
board.
meeting in June, first meeting in May?
This one?
Well, don't you have to have them authorize the letter?
No, they authorized that before.
Oh, okay.
First meeting in May?
Okay, I make a motion that we I make a motion that we adjourn the application of Christopher and Jean Lynch. Oh, I can't, I'm recused on this.
Okay, they need another
Why
motion.
is it going so far ahead?
Because if you're going to write the letter
That they don't have yet.
that you don't have yet, then I have to go to the zoning board of appeals.
And you have to get on the agenda there?
Get on their agenda,
I
which
got
I could
it.
do.
Well, this is only February.
April.
Okay. What do you
How
want?
about May?
It just seemed far.
First meeting,
You said June, May.
all right, first or second?
Second.
Second meeting, well, they don't meet until the end of the month anyway,
Oh.
so it's
So
either
we
the
got
first
there.
meeting in May or the first meeting in June. First meeting in May.
First meeting.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to adjourn this matter until the first meeting in May.
We worked it out.
Motion by Rob, is there a second?
I second the
Second
motion.
by Susan, all in favor, Rob?
Aye.
Susan?
Yes.
Jeff?
Aye.
And I
Aye.
as well, and Christine is opposed. You recused. Next application, please.
Next application is Robert McCabe and Joan Shack, 100 Pulaski Street. This is construction alterations to an existing home with a deck, porch and deck.
Is there the applicant present?
Oh, God, all this.
Okay.
Oh, that solves that problem.
We'll wait for a recall. Probably till be late in the evening. Next application, please.
Next application is Wickapog 1 LLC at 145 Wickapog Road.
Good evening.
Your names for the record?
My name's David Sepulveda, architect, representing Zachary Goodich Architecture and Design.
Charles Regensburg, the builder.
My name is Devin Telberg. I work with the architect.
Are those small plans?
Yeah, we have.
Yes.
Oh, we have them.
Yes. Right, thank you. Yeah, that's right. Proceed. May I proceed?
Yes, we are looking for the approval of the addition and renovation to 145 Wickapog. The current house is a non-historic existing house at the corner of the property. We're looking to create an addition to the right and the rear of the house.
You want to give us north, south, east, west that shows the location in your photo?
Yes, this is the north side of Wickapog.
Is there any addition or anything changing on the north side of
Oh, yeah.
On the north side,
That's the
so
south side of the property.
this is the south side of the property, north side of Wickapog.
Okay.
The current non-historic house, but the original house is this portion here. We are looking to keep the integrity of the house, restore the foundation of the house. The addition will be towards the right. We are going to demo.
Give me direction. Just for purposes of keeping record, you like to have direction. So north, south, east, and west. So you can let me know. You look at the north side of the home now.
Yes,
The addition will be on the
the addition would be on the west side.
west.
No, the east side.
Sorry, the east side, and on the
west
south side.
gable, is that
Yes,
correct?
yes. The west gable will be the new addition, which will mimic.
Could you show us on the photo the area?
Yes, this is the west side of the addition, which will mimic.
East side.
East side, sorry, east side.
You want to put an you want to put the
No, I got it.
compass up there? So you-
The east side addition will mimic the gable A-frame roof of the existing side of this house.
So the area of the extant house that is there now, that's to the east, under
Yes.
your new gable, that's being demolished? What's being demolished? There seem to be some questions.
Yeah, so what's existing on this side of the house is just a one-story 1974
Oh,
addition.
okay. It's derelict, a lot of this.
Yeah,
Okay, so you're building everything underneath on the first floor of the gable too, on the west gable also?
we're keeping the structure.
Okay.
And we're keeping the, it was originally a shingle exterior, So we want to go back to that. Right now, it's the 1970s mineral board exterior. So we want to return it to a lot of its historical integrity.
Zach, there's an incomplete evaluation form in there.
No, it's the bold.
Yeah, I couldn't see it.
It's supposed to be a no. I asked the same question.
I was looking,
Very subtle.
and I didn't notice the,
It's the N, no, the N is bold, I was told.
Yes, but it doesn't copy all that well.
Well, right.
And then
That was my question too.
I usually circle it, and I didn't. Yeah, the ends are bolded,
Says nothing.
meaning no. But I usually circle it because that's clearer. So it doesn't meet any of those criteria.
that's all I want to know.
Okay. Bring it
Yeah.
back.
So we're
Sorry, I usually circle those ends for that reason, for the Ys.
So for board members, we have a photo on file. This represents the west gable that's going to remain, correct?
Mm-hmm.
To replicate the west gable to the east,
Correct.
carry the, you're going to be demolishing the east end and creating a front porch to extend over, correct?
Correct.
If you could show us there in the photo.
Yes. This will be the recreated front porch, which will wrap around.
So the one story is going to be demolished, and you're going to recreate the entire east side of the,
Correct. The whole entire east side will be recreated.
okay. And that's your front changes.
Yes.
You can go through the rear.
If we go to the rear, you want me to show you on plan
Exterior elevation.
So I'm going to show you elevations.
elevations?
So this is the elevation next to the driveway when you go up the driveway.
This is the rear elevation or the
The
south side?
West elevation?
West side elevation.
Yeah,
And-
western exposure. Sorry, the western exposure.
Yeah. And so this is the front porch to orient you that we just saw. And then this is an existing bay window. These are all existing windows, window locations. We'd like to replace the windows and recreate the same dimensions of all the trims and all the mullions in the same shapes and forms that they are now, and carry that through the rest of the new addition.
Which portion from the front to the rear is the addition?
So this would be the addition
So
side?
that's the envelope of the addition,
Yes,
volume.
yes. And these dimensions mark the existing location and the proposed location on the
see.
west side.
Okay?
That's the way we-
If you can go to the A103, just to show the roof diagram, I think the board members can get a better idea of the layout.
This is a little out of order. There we go.
There you go.
So just to kind of orient you,
Yes, please.
this is the existing portion of the house, which is the west side,
Yeah, the west gable.
west gable. This will be the recreated addition on the east side. The existing house is in this location. The knockdown is on this side, so the rest of this roof would be recreated.
And the roof, this is taller than the gables?
Only by a few feet up to the building
Correct.
maximum.
And that ridge height to the top is
Yeah.
32 feet. And then the ridges at the front where the gables are at 28.
So, wait, I missed
Yeah.
the first part of this. So the gables are, I think this is hard to read, your first, the front page, the elevation, this, to show how the roof, across Wickapog when you're driving, when you're facing the house. So this huge back portion is higher than these gables?
By a few feet, yes.
Correct.
The
Yeah,
existing
so I find
height,
this kind of deceptive myself, but, because I'm not good at imagining this stuff. So it's going to be, if I'm facing this house, I see roof all the way across here, is that correct?
no, that perspective is somewhat accurate because of the line of the eye. It's a little further back.
Right, so if I orient the roof plan like this is Wickapog Road. The rear ridge that you're looking at towards the
Yes.
back is at 32 feet high. The smaller ridges, which is the existing ridge of the existing house, is at 28 feet, 1.5 inches. And then the new addition, which we're mimicking the gable,
Right.
will be at the same height.
So,
This ridge, which is existing, will die into the newer, higher portion of the house, which is centered. If you're looking at the rendering from Wikipod.
And if you look at A202, that will give you a better view of it.
Jeff, do you have any comments?
You know, I think the process would be benefited by a more detailed color rendering and perspective. The overall design I'm okay with. I'm a little concerned about the appearance of the addition to the rear and it coming out to the side. From this perspective, it looks fine. I'm just not sure what it would look like front on.
Okay, so you want a street view or an
Yeah.
accurate visual
Rendering.
color rendering, three-dimensional rendering that shows dimension and size, shows the difference in the various elevations, especially specifically the roof line.
Okay.
right, because on either side of this house are these big houses that go back really far. I don't have an issue so much with that, but actually, I would like to see how the roof line,
From the street view.
yeah,
Okay.
I would, please.
Christina, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I would like to see that.
Sorry?
I would like to see the other houses on the street in perspective to
Oh,
this.
I don't want that.
Well, I mean, it would benefit by a streetscape. I mean, I can pretty much imagine, I know the newer houses that have been built, and you're keeping the vernacular of the Victorian type of simple farmhouse, so that's a plus. But the houses that were once small Victorian farmhouses are now double wide,
Right.
60% coverage of the yard, so we're getting to the point where I think a streetscape would be helpful.
I personally think on either side this is actually superior to what's on either side of the house, of the two of the houses that flank it. But I would like to see I'm only asking for the front face-on,
Right.
full frontal elevation.
I understand.
How's that? Because I find this slightly kind of deceptive, or I just can't get it.
Right.
Rob?
I echo what's been said. I'm a little concerned with that mass in the middle, being taller, you say only a few feet, and I know elevations can be a little deceptive because you see it from different perspective. I think in this case, the road you can estimate for me, but do you know approximately how far above the grade of the road the property currently sits approximately?
Approximately maybe about 1 foot, if not even.
So you're already looking up slightly at least, and then you have the perspective with that ridge line being further back.
Correct.
So it's not going to sit out the way it does on elevation, but I do have a little concern, and it's a little accentuated by the projection of that new form to the west,
Right.
without any windows or detailing there. And I don't know if there's anything you can think about that. I'm going to guess it's about 5 feet or so that comes out.
Correct.
5 feet is what it
Would there,
So, I'm sorry, the perspective of that sketch was actually taken from an actual photo
Yep.
and then modeled in 3D, so that would actually be the correct
perspective.
human scale perspective of looking back at the house.
So, this portion here on the west side, it just strikes me as being a little undetailed and signs of a very big form going through that building that seems a little jarring to me. And so maybe the perspective that Christine is talking about, that other people are talking about, will help me see it differently.
So the perspective is more looking towards the side of the house and not so much the front, or directly towards the front?
It sounds to me that you're probably best served by doing a 3D rendering on all sides.
Okay.
That's your best bet.
Is that like front on, like elevation?
I'm asking for the front on. I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
Curtis,
My comments?
I had one other.
Do you have anything to say, Curtis?
The other question just had to do, the windows that are in the connector portion on the second floor underneath that, the eyebrow roof there, the shed roof, the shed dormer, they're smaller, but shorter than the other windows, because you've got some floor level issues going on with old house and new house, I suspect. Where those windows, I'd love to know whether you've probably looked at it. Are there ways to get them longer? Are there ways to make that form longer and make it work in the house? It looks to me, those windows are either too big to be sort of true eyebrow windows and too small to be,
Well, they are about, I think, like 2.5, 3 feet tall. They're low on the floor inside the room.
they are.
Yeah, and would have to examine a bit more about how the roof lines up with the second roof behind it, and how that's all getting a little squeezed. But I would love to, take a closer look at it and see if you to look larger, is that it?
If you could raise the angle of the shed roof a little bit and get another 6 inches of headroom to make them rectangular rather than square each side of those windows, that might help.
I see what you're thinking. Okay.
Sorry, thanks. That's okay. Type of brick you're using for the chimney, also the size of the chimneys just seems really, really small considering. I just want to get a better idea. I'm sure that'll be in the color rendering, 3D rendering you're proposing, you're putting forward. But they just seem very small. From the front, when I look at 202, you don't see this, that staggered chimney dimensions. I see it further on 201 where there's dimension and it shows that frontage is going to, when you're looking at something one-dimensional, I see a one-dimensional stacks.
Right.
I don't believe that they're going to be the same length if one is further back than the other.
We'll show
Okay.
It is Danish brick, though, that's what we're...
I understand. Just telling you, you're presenting something, we're looking at it, we're trying to get an idea of what you're presenting before us.
Okay.
Secondly, the length of the addition total. Now the addition and the new, what would be the total length of that? That's the westerly side?
Yes, the total frontage width of the house is approximately 58 feet.
Depth? And the depth?
And the depth with
the addition?
Yes, with the addition at the longest part is approximately, right,
Right, so
is
we're
approximately,
looking at that dimension?
right, is approximately 86 feet, 3.5 inches.
And the house itself is going to be white for board, or is it, what's the material that's going to be
The
used?
material siding is Alaskan cedar,
Cedar.
straight edge,
Okay.
and it will be painted white,
Painted white trim,
white trim,
white lattice,
white lattice.
brick on the chimney,
Brick on the chimney will be Danish brick.
and the roof.
The roof will be the gray Alaskan cedar, and it's natural material.
I think you'll have a better representation when we are able to see a little bit more depth.
Okay.
I know the second-story deck is accessible, however, it's just a small Juliet balcony. So normally, typically, we would have issue with privacy if there's a large entertainment area.
Right.
But it doesn't seem to be the issue in this situation. Just wanted for the record to identify that. Because people will say, you approved this and you didn't approve it there. This is the reason why.
Okay.
Won't keep.
We need a little bit more detail on it.
There was a letter that was asked or requested to be read into the record.
Can you read this into the record? You can have a copy of this letter.
Addressed to the board, which says, "We have been the owners of 10 Cobblefield Lane since October 2015. The northern end of the 145 Wichita property abuts our exclusive use area in the Wichita HOA. The wine-infested trees, a jungle of brambles, and a dilapidated barn are right in front of the patios behind our house. Photos are attached. The property has not been maintained for a considerable time. Certainly since we bought our home. Raccoons have been seen around. It is a very unsightly view from our house. Also, since the barn is to be removed and a swimming pool is proposed, there should be landscape screening along the property boundary. We request that approval of this application include both a requirement to clean up the entire property, including removal of the barn, and landscape screening installed, particularly along the north boundary. The board has done a great job in preserving and enhancing the beauty of our village. We hope that you will require the new owners of 145 Wickapog Road to bring their property up to village standards."
Is there a proposed landscape plan currently?
Currently, there isn't, but there is on the site plan suggestions of what is hard and softscapes. And I could walk you a little bit through more.
Just to add, we do intend to put in landscape screening at the rear, absolutely, and we're in agreement with that recommendation.
Well, with the amount of addition being introduced to the parcel, and since the neighbor is suggesting this, I think it would be wise to, at the next meeting, you also propose what currently exists, what will be removed, and what will be added, giving us a better idea.
Okay.
So that's specimens, that's height, giving us an idea of what you're proposing overall.
Okay.
Anything further, board? We didn't really talk about the barn in the rear. It's coming down, but you're proposing a new barn, correct?
No, we're proposing to demo the existing barn.
So you're just adding the two-car garage?
Yes.
Two-car garage, the bay door? I see the cross. Could you just explain to us or describe to us what style of the actual doors itself, the garage doors?
So the garage doors. If you look on sheet,
It would be on A205.
Okay, I don't think you have a federation here.
Is that the cottage?
205, the garage doors will be in the barn style, carriage style doors. It's two double doors. They're facing, yeah, and the wood would be mahogany. Yes, mahogany with applied mahogany trim.
You're saying the garage doors will be wood as well?
Yes.
And there's a cottage, or am I crazy?
Yes. There is a
Oh,
cottage.
wait, which question are you answering?
So, two. And that's not being considered in this application?
No, we're not doing anything to it.
Okay.
It remains.
Yeah.
Correct.
Anything else further? You doing any renovation or restoration to it or to the barn? You just gonna leave it dilapidated?
The barn is going to be entirely demolished. It's-
Sorry, the cottage.
Oh, the cottage? We might replace the toilet.
Yeah. The cottage is
It's in fair condition.
in fair condition. It's an old cottage. It's been, the foundation walls have been restructurized. It's been kept on the interior in its original finishes and fixtures for the last 100 years. New fiber shingle roofs have been applied to the roof.
And you're saying it's in good repair?
It's in good condition.
Yeah, that's okay.
Pretty good to me.
They have one old thing?
All right, so you'll come back with a complete application at the next meeting, more detailed.
Yes.
Taking consideration what you're giving us is what we have to read. We need to be able to explain it, define it, and be able to render a decision final. Let's see if there's any public comment on the application. Is there any public comment? All right. You-
Yeah, is that the copy of the copy?
Yes.
Yeah, we can take that.
You need to prepare yourself, so therefore you're asking this board to adjourn so you can prepare at the next meeting?
Yeah.
Yes. So the motion would be to approve the applicant's request to adjourn until our next meeting.
I make a motion that we approve the applicant, Wicapog LLC on Westwood Road to adjourn to our next meeting.
Motion is by Christina, is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan, all in favor, Rob? Aye. Christina? Susan?
Aye.
And Jim?
Aye.
Did we just miss,
Yes, Antoinette, she unfortunately had, I think, a cough.
Okay.
She'll be back.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
For a couple of minutes.
Give her a
Okay? All right. Just for record, I'm sure you will look at the video,
I
but
will.
we all,
Aye.
Okay, great, thank you so much. Great.
next application, please.
Thank you. I don't know why they're in this order, but.
31 minutes. You know, Antoinette, you can take some of these.
Well,
Next application is 31 Meadowmere Place, and this is an application to construct a two-story single-family dwelling with attached garage.
okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board. Andrew Giambertone, representing Mr. and Mrs. Turgerman at 31 Meadowmere Place in Southampton. The house is proposed to be built on a vacant lot, which is approximately 200 feet south of Meadowmere Lane on Meadowmere Place on the west side of the road. The house is on a lot that is 40,900 square feet. It is fully compliant to all the zoning regulations in that area. The front yard setback requirement is 60 feet. We're providing 64 foot. The side yard is required to be 20 foot on one side. We're providing 20 feet. On the other side, it's required to be 20. We're providing 49 feet. The aggregate is required to be 60 feet. We're providing 69 feet. And the rear yard is required to be 70. We're providing 94 feet. The house is designed to be a shingle-style home to accommodate their family. It would use all classic shingle detailing, steeply pitched roofs, cedar shake siding, white painted trim, authentic divided light windows, cedar shake roof, and brick chimneys.
You're going to do some creative riding on your lawn to get into the garage?
Yes, we're going to do some creative. This was before we got into the site plan. This was developed. So the site plan does depict a driving court in the front. The site plan.
Do you have a set of small plans for us?
I do.
I think the driveway now comes to, the entrance is on the left, correct, on the south side?
The entrance is on the left, and it comes, we've got sets of you want to
Hand them in, please stand.
That's a fall or decorative door right now that you see on the...
Yes, it is.
I got a stamp. Thank you.
Oh, you mean that's not the door?
No, that's on the side. That's decorative. The garage door is actually on the south side of the house.
So why the decorative door?
Just for aesthetics, try and make it look like more of a barn.
Stamp one more.
Than just seeing what appears to be the edge of the house.
You probably won't get a favorable decision on that. Try to discourage, well, let's take a look at the plan overall.
Okay.
Here, do you want to share?
Yeah.
This is pretty big. I missed that. I didn't see that that was
more.
busy.
Yeah, you want three.
Not really, but thank you. Oh, right at the top.
Try to discourage as best as possible street-facing garages.
Okay.
Especially in this community, this neighborhood. I'm sure there are going to be comments on the height, visually, the height. It kind of reads as a 3-story building. What is the roof height?
35 feet to
It is
the ridge.
35 feet.
And there are many examples of gable roofs with dormers in throughout the village. It's in keeping with the historic character of the village.
The little, well, I see the cupola and I see the 2 chimneys. Trying to get better idea. This is better representation.
Are there 2 or 3 chimneys? I see 2 different renderings here.
There's an outdoor chimney.
The outdoor chimney is stone,
Yes.
and it would be different than the
Then the 2 brick chimneys that are on the outdoor chimneys on the back side of the house.
No, it's not.
And the 2, it's
chimney.
Yeah, I see these.
And then you also have a widow's walk.
We were told that the fence on the Widow's Walk would be considered additional height, so we removed it from the application. That's why it's not shown in the rendering you see there.
Oh, this one, this one.
That was a preliminary plan, and that's
So
when...
I should ignore this page?
Yes.
Well, there's several things that I'm having a challenge with. A, the front rendering you have here doesn't have the stone chimney. This one doesn't
The
have-
stone chimney's on the back side of the
It's on
house.
the back.
But this is,
Does it clear the house?
How tall is it?
That we're supposed to ignore that.
That was a preliminary rendering.
so you want me to ignore this?
Yeah.
It should act like it's
Get it
not
out of
part
here.
of it.
So this one is out.
All right, let's do that. The second one is,
And this one is without the windows.
oh, you don't have it? Oh, yes, you do.
We have all 4 elevations in the home.
No.
So we're going to all agree that the front door needs to go down.
Except
Yes.
this version does not have the front
Right.
picture down.
And they're going to put in, we don't know what.
We're going to have to propose something
Something.
alternative.
Well, they're making it look like,
Is there a side elevation?
And you have the dormers. You have the 2A, and then you have a eyebrows or oval.
Right.
Is there a reason why you have the different styles? There's something,
I've done it on several homes. It accentuates the entry axes of the house, and
so you're purposely looking to draw in on the overall elevation, front elevation, to give it a grander look?
Well, I'm trying to draw it on I'm trying to emphasize the front entrance of the house.
You based it on the White House.
Simple.
Okay. Whatever.
Jeff, you have any comments, any further comments?
Yeah, I do. So there are a lot of small elements that, when they're all put together, create what is visually busy. And please, I know it's your baby, so don't take any offense, but so Curtis already mentioned to you the garage door, which is just a matter of philosophical disdain for street-facing garage doors. But then you have a number of elements here. You have these vaulted windows on the second floor over the door, and then outlined by white trim. And then above that, the eyebrow dormer. So yes, you are accentuating the front door, but to a point that I think is overemphasis. So then let me continue on. Along the gables here, you have these cross members. And perhaps if that were...
Chipping?
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
If there weren't other issues, maybe that would be okay in the general overview, but again, as you add up all these small items, it adds up to a very busy presence. And then you have chimneys that are elongated with, I don't know what the technical term is for them, cones or whatever, but again, they look, I don't know how to describe it, top hats or something like that.
Chimney pots.
What's that?
Chimney pots is what the Brits
Chimney
call
pots?
it.
Thank you. Anyway, a more simpler chimney would be appealing to these eyes. And then the cupola over the garage, perhaps if that was half the scale that it was, it would, again, simplify. So the overall theme for me is a less is more.
Okay.
A simpler version of what you have.
Susan?
I agree with Jeff completely. There are just too many competing elements, and actually especially above the front door. Although even with your 3 dormers, one has crosshatched windows. Where does that come from?
The diamond grills?
Yeah,
Each of the dormers have diamond
They all
grills.
have
not on mine.
It's the
Sorry.
rendering.
The rendering.
It's the rendering. It's the
to
rendering.
render.
What?
If you go
Oh.
into the elevations,
Well, I'm looking at the rendering.
go to the elevations to show.
Okay. Pick a rendering, any rendering.
You know, maybe it would just be, okay, well, I think it should be simpler. It's very hard to make heads and tails. Okay, so this isn't, so we're getting rid of the garage doors. At least they're consistent. Okay. But there just seems to be way too much going on in the front of this house for no actual, then there's the balustrade, the railing goes in a vertical, in a horizontal, in a diagonal. There's just way too much. It needs to be simplified in ways that cut down on the sort of noise that it creates, visual noise. And also the white caps on the chimneys seem to be an afterthought. First of all, I'd love to see an actual rendering of what it actually is, because obviously we don't have one, because these windows are different. And I agree that the garage door, maybe you can, I don't know what you can do, make windows. It's just too busy. And so now where is the entrance? That's my other, what is the approach with the driveway? Do we have that in here?
You know, the first page is your site plan.
Right there.
Oh, it comes around. So you have so this actually, there's a lot more gravel or stonework here. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I would really appreciate a front rendering that was accurate and showed all of this. And I also would appreciate, I think that there needs to be simplification. There are way too many design elements that are flailing around.
Christine, any comments?
I agree with most of what's been said right now. I think that in your effort through the architecture to show the grandness of the house, you've kind of diminished the impact. And I think that echoing the windows above the garage and adding all the extra twiddly bits is kind of just makes it look less grand and more fussy. So I think that I'm sure that you'll be able to come up with a simplification of what you have.
Twiddly bits and loud visual. These are things I'm pulling away from. It's good. Rob,
Poor Rob.
you got to match twiddly bits and loud visual.
I agree with many of the comments that have been made. I did have a question, a just factual question. Is the garage a double height or 1.5 height space?
The garage, no, it's a single-story space. It's just a steeply pitched roof above the garage.
So all of those windows and the dormers are just letting light down on top of the cars? Okay.
More or less. He does have a car collection, he's thinking.
Okay, great. That particular window, you've heard the comment on the decorative door on the front, but that window is the grandest window on the property. It seems a little, if you're trying to recreate the look of a shed or a barn or something a little more historic, that it seems odd to me. So that's the only one, that's the other comment I would throw in.
Good point.
Good point.
Well, you heard, that's the reason why I asked the questions originally about the orientation of the dormers. You're trying to create a grand home, but you're trying to create a grand home and then add a lot of touches and details that you feel will bring it over the top. Probably even thought more Hampton-ish, when in actuality it made it less. Some people come before us and say we were looking for a Hamptons home, but not being familiar with the overall vernacular of the community, you made a overly busy home. Issue with the stone, even though stone chimney at the rear, I still believe it's something that can be seen from the road. It's on the side of the building, correct? So there's nothing tying in that stone to anything, unless you're telling me the front porch is the same stone?
It could be if that was an issue. The base of the front porch could be stone.
It's not a could. Either you're presenting it or you're not presenting it as such.
Honestly, I've done chimneys in different materials on many homes and never seen it.
Is this your first one here in the village?
No, it's not.
Okay. I haven't seen it before. I particularly don't like the chimney at the rear. If you're going to tie it in, I'd rather you tie it in with what's currently existing. It's another foreign element that you're adding. You have a cupola above the barn. I understand why. It is grand. It looks, but I think when you bring down some of the busyness, maybe that will be. It'll take our eyes away from all of the large windows, the garage door, and all of the grandness of it all. And I think it'll tie it all in if you can just quiet it from all the noise.
Tone it down.
The balcony there in the front is not accessible at all, just for the record, correct? All right. Do you have a landscape plan planned for this particular project?
Not yet. We are developing one. There'll be extensive screen planting around the perimeter of the property to screen both the neighbors and to screen themselves.
Okay. And you'll have that prepared for us at the next meeting?
And, for instance, this has like a flagstone walk, and this is a different walk. I'd like to see actually in the elevation, actually what you see from the street.
Sure.
Please. Thank you.
Anything further from the board? Zach, it's not in the historic district, important area, important section of the village. Is there anything further you would add to the?
No, I was following all your comments and I thought they were quite accurate. I mean, it's an impressive house. I feel there are perhaps too many periods represented. And all the elements individually are quite interesting. I think they're just a few too many and reflecting different periods, so a little more consolidation of that would be good.
Any public comment on the application? Please step forward. We can just make way, there will be public comment.
Hi there. It's my first go-around, so if it's something that should just be addressed in a letter, you can just tell me.
Your name for the record.
My name is Gabriella Leff. Okay. I'm owner of the property to the north at 126 Meadowmere Lane. And just to note, and something to be considered, as they have not yet entered landscaping. We have been owning this home since 1968, and the property as it exists now is brush and tree and has been in a natural state. So we have certain concerns about things like the overly high chimneys. I took a look at the plans today. I do have great respect for the fact that the garage is on the other side and that they've made efforts, I think, to shield us from what would be noisy. The pool has been moved over. But I am concerned about screening. I'm concerned about noise. There's a screened porch. There's that tall elevated chimney with a screened porch. I don't know what kind of noise and visuals I'll be having from that. So we just have concerns about that.
I did ask if there were a landscape plan.
Right.
The applicant this time presented that there's not one, but there will be one. And we asked that it be presented at the next meeting. So hopefully that resolves some of your concerns. We'll also try to make reference that be in the file within the next week or so that the applicant or neighbors have the opportunity to review it before the next meeting. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, you're asking the board to adjourn so that you can prepare yourself with the changes and some of the suggestions that have been made.
Respectfully requested.
Excellent. Motion to approve applicant's request to adjourn until our next meeting.
I make a motion that we approve the applicant's request to adjourn to our next meeting.
Motion by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor. Rob?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Aye. Last non-historic application for this evening.
This is the Carol Petrie Trust, property located on the west side of Cooper's Farm Road. It's for approval from the board to construct a 100-square-foot one-story addition and 50-square-foot second-floor dormer addition to an existing garage.
Good morning. This is mostly, I'm Jim McChesney, I'm the architect for the project. It's mostly an interior project. We have, we're reconfiguring a lot of the spaces inside, but we are adding a little bit of an addition in the living room in the back southwest corner, which we're adding to the footprint, but it actually is already part of a covered porch. So right here, there's an existing chimney, and we're adding this section and then putting the chimney over here.
Can you show us any elevations?
So on the elevation, it occurs over here.
Well, if you move over. Okay.
Okay, and then I guess the biggest change to the outside is we're just adding this dormer on the back.
Could you just show that first portion that's being changed again while Charlie has it?
It's over in here.
Okay.
So this is a new chimney. The existing chimney is right about here.
Okay.
And so this roof is existing, but we're just adding it to the first floor as finished space, not covered porch space.
And then it's the
And
dormer.
then this dormer on the second floor just to enlarge a bedroom. And all the materials on the outside will be consistent with what's there.
Rob, any comments?
I just had a question as to why you're removing the windows from the garage.
They were kind of rotted, and we put big trees in front of the house.
How do we deal with landscaping that may or may not be permanent? Because if those weren't there, that's a big, to me, that's a big form with no light into or out of the house, so that's my concern.
They were kind of rotted, so we took them out, and
it's a garage.
It's a garage, and we
Well, I mean, it's still a visual impact. Do you feel that like you say, if there's a removal or some disaster happens where the trees or brush that's in front of it no longer exist, now you're stuck with
that's the concern.
Facade. So it's a matter of reference. So you could ask if you feel that that's something that takes away from the aesthetics or design of the house. We have to take all things in consideration.
Okay, well, he's answered the question. I don't have any further questions. Let me ponder it.
Christine?
I have no question.
Susan?
Well, actually, Rob mentioned the windows to me, and when I looked at it, I thought that he was pretty right. It's a big space. And it actually seems peculiar to me.
Mm-hmm.
The trees aren't there, right?
We are about to put them in there in the spring. We're debating what is going to be put there.
Okay, because that
The owner's
seems so
done a lot of
tall.
landscaping already. Right, I walk.
Oh, okay.
So they seem committed, certainly the current owner seems committed to proper,
Okay,
good
well,
landscaping.
we'll see.
Jeff, comments?
Well, so the good news, bad news is I see them digging up the area in front of the garage to do plantings, but the windows have already been taken out
Yeah.
and boarded, so, I mean, we'd have to ask them to reverse that, which they've already done.
Ask who to reverse what?
The windows have already been
Yeah, it's all
taken out.
They were
blacked out.
rotted.
And shingled over.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm okay with the shingles, so I'm not asking him to take it back, but it's already been done.
Right, well, that's why it looks like a big
We're under
facade.
We're under the assumption that,
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
if or when, or if an
Right.
applicant does any changes or adjustments that are, have not been pre-approved, we go under the assumption they haven't, and therefore this board's still looking at. Now, again, enforcing it, if you felt that's something that you want
No.
reviewed or looked at, you said there's no issue with it?
no, I'm okay with this.
I'm okay with-
Solid shingle, and it looks like they have every intention of doing significant planting.
I'm okay with the design overall. I don't have any issue with the very minimum changes that you're making. I think they're necessary and needed. There is a significant amount of landscape being done already there, and I think that whatever the final result is, it's going to look well. It's going to look nice. Is there any public comment on the application? Therefore, motion to approve. Thank you.
Make a motion that we approve the application of,
Carol Petrie
Carol
Trust.
Petrie Trust on Cooper's Farm Road.
Thank you.
It's motion by Christina. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Second by Susan. All in favor, Rob?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. That concludes our non-historic applications for this evening. Boy, are we going, we're moving pretty well. I like this, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's good.
Wait till the brakes get put on.
Okay, first application, historic. There's a letter in a file, that's still a letter in a file. Is that an outstanding, it's still May 2018. That's a standing adjournment, correct?
Here, 1 second. I don't think it was, actually. I think it was new.
Yes.
It's a new letter. I'd like to postpone until May, request to postpone until.
Is there a new letter in the file, Dave?
Oh, no, that's not it.
That's not new.
Otherwise, it's standing.
Oh, I have it adjourned to May 7th, so this is different, though. Yeah, May 7th.
May 7th, okay.
Okay.
So that stands on the original adjournment. Next application, please.
The next application is 472 First Neck Lane, demolish an existing cottage and demo partial and construct 1- and 2-story additions to existing dwelling.
Last meeting, we adjourned the meeting because a ton of information was added to the file, both from the applicant, the community objective, as well as Zach's report. If you don't mind, I'd like to just start with Zach's report because it was on hold. It was in the file early, but did not have the opportunity to just give their summation of his report. If you could do so for the record, please.
Sure. It's about 2.5 pages long, so I think I should just give an abbreviated version. This has been in the file since the 7th of February. So to paraphrase, the current proposed north addition was reduced from the prior proposal by approximately 15 feet. And so that addition visually, in my estimation, is more proportionate to the existing house than it had been. The second design modification, which I had suggested previously, was to reduce the number of windows in that extension because just the fact that there were more windows present than in the adjacent portion of the original house made that extension appear even longer than it was. And so the present proposal did address each of those. I thought it was appropriate in this third report to try to be precise and concise in where I feel, in my opinion, the present proposal fits to the code, most importantly, to the village guidelines, which are not the code, but are the instructions that are put out to assist applicants in their designs, and to the Secretary of the Interior standards, which again are not in the code, but they are referenced by the code. And so there are really, in my estimation, three important contexts, all of which should be used to evaluate how so-called appropriate this proposal is. So number one, of course, and most important is village code, which says, features or properties which make a significant contribution to the character of a landmark shall be altered as little as possible. Okay. That clause is referring to the actual features of the property to be affected, not the features proposed. The second provision
Could you explain that in a little detail?
It says features or properties, houses, which make a significant contribution to the character of a landmark or historic district. So in other words, the features of the existing house, which make a significant contribution to the character of the house, the landmark, or the district, shall be altered as little as possible. So that is referring to what presently stands. That is not referring to what is being proposed to be newly built. Second provision is any alteration of an existing feature or property, house, shall be compatible with the historic character as well as with the character of nearby properties. Fine. Compatibility is defined in terms of the scale, the texture, materials, color, visual relationship, etc. Okay, so we're dealing with that here in general. The guidelines advise that large-scale visible additions, which this proposal certainly is, should be both compatible with the character of the existing building and should reflect the times in which it was built. It should not recreate the past or give a mistaken impression of false antiquity. This comes up from time to time. Someone proposes a new build which tries to replicate or imitate precisely something else. So the idea of recreating the past and giving a mistaken impression that that's actually also old too is not to be encouraged. Okay. And in my opinion, this proposed most recent North Addition conforms to these provisions of both the code and the guidelines. The scale and the massing of the addition are subservient to the existing historic house. I know this comes up for constant discussion, as it should. And I think I've pointed out before that by virtue of the fact that this house is quite unusual, especially in its height, it gives the applicant an advantage in the sense that many times you'll see a proposed addition, and because the scale of the existing house and the height of the roof is not exceptional, the scale of what's being proposed challenges what already exists. In this case, the two-story addition is clearly lower than, considerably lower than, the scale and the massing, et cetera, of the existing building. So visually, there's no confusion over what is old and what exists and what is being proposed to be built. You're all free to disagree. This is my professional opinion. The architectural detailing of the addition is harmonious with that of the existing house. Important features of the new construction include the stepped-back facade. I think it's a subtle thing, but again, this proposal is not replicating something that stood before. It is quite intentionally breaking up the front facade in two places to step it back, not only to push the visual effect of it away, but also to distinguish it from that which had been built before. It's not imitating what stood before. And the fenestration, et cetera, inspired by, but don't replicate the documented historic fabric. Okay. Now we turn to the Secretary of the Interior standards. I'll try to wrap this up quickly. I'm sorry, this is going longer than I thought. There are really only two standards, 9 and 10. Number 9 states, new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, etc. The new work will be differentiated from the old and will be compatible with the materials, features, etc., and massing to protect the integrity of the existing property. I think it's important here, and I don't believe this has been stated before, because it's been asserted that this wonderful early house stands as built, and that somehow what's being proposed is going to, I believe the word destroy has occurred, clearly an exaggeration. If you look at the existing house, 3 of the facades have been extremely changed or altered or in fact replaced. The only facade that stands visually as built is the one that faces the lake, and that in fact is in the public way, and that's of greatest concern. The facade that faces, and that's the east facade. The side that faces south contains 2 additions, a squarish block of 2 stories, and then what is left of the former west extension that extended and now evidently has migrated to the property to the north. So when you look at that side of the house, it's hardly unaltered since 1880. In fact, it's been transformed by virtue of the fact that significant sections of what had been added at one time still remain. The west facade is entirely rebuilt because you see what was built in 1897, not in the 1920s, as has been recently suggested. So that entire facade has been changed, except for the very high, wonderful roof line. Now we go to the north. That would be the third of the 3 sides which have been transformed over time. And that is the side that once held a 2-story extension, as has been continually pointed out. And when that extension was removed, that entire facade was infilled. So we can visualize what the original house looked like, but to visualize it is very different from saying that it now stands unchanged. And so that brings us to standard 10. New additions and adjacent or related new construction will be undertaken in such a manner that if removed, ironically, when you understand the history of this particular house, which in fact has happened historically, if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. This application seeks to restore and preserve what stands. And the addition, imagine a north addition being built and removed. What a ridiculous thought. Actually, that's already happened. And so something was built, it's been removed, and wonderfully, we now have the original building because substantially the original structure stands. And that meets standard 10. And so in my estimation, this proposal meets the code, the guidelines, and the standards. And that's why I have indicated that, further revisions could be made. That's up to the applicant, of course. But as far as things stand now, I feel that it substantially meets our criteria. That's my report.
Do you have anything further to add?
Well, John Bennett for the applicant.
Just to say, just so we understand, not a history lesson. We've been through.
I think, if you'll hear me out, I think you'll be pleased. Okay.
Okay. Just to let you know that now we're going to try our best not to go over an entire history lesson of the application.
I received a 20-page letter today from Mr. Fife. I received an affidavit from Jonathan Foster, not Jonathan Foster, the building inspector. I find that none of it is, Mr. Fife's letter is a recitation of prior arguments. Mr. Foster's letter goes on to argue, again, despite what we think was very conclusive evidence about the length of the former addition, which, to a certain degree is a sideshow, because the question is whether or not it's appropriate, not what the original length is, but we've demonstrated we've stayed within the original length. With the caveat that I wouldn't want to not be able to provide any additional information that Mr. Coburn would like because he's new to the application, or foreclose his ability to ask any questions about the applications, but for reserving some short time for rebuttal if I feel necessary after any public comment, I have nothing else to say.
Thank you. Rob?
Excuse me, I'm sorry, and I would ask that at the end, I apologize, I interrupted myself and started. I would ask at the end of the meeting, and again, it's up to you, that you would close the matter for determination.
Rob, just a matter of, just for public record, just want to get your opinion on the application. Have you had the opportunity to see past meetings? Have you reviewed minutes and material that have already been submitted? Do you feel that you are in a position where you can sit in on the meeting and give a objective review and an open review? Have enough information to do so?
Reserving the right to still ask naive questions, maybe unintentionally, maybe intentionally. I've spent approximately 30 hours in the last week related to this file.
That's it? Nice.
I have read everything in all the files, and I have seen every minute of every video. So I've heard the arguments. I think I understand the history. I may have the benefit of having that compressed and projected into one image. I do have a couple of questions, but I think perhaps no more so than the rest of the board. I do feel I can participate.
Okay. That's what I want to know. All right. Absence of any additional, we did also receive information this afternoon from counsel for the neighbor objecting, as well as from, I believe, the architect. It was a summation of their objection to the application. Nothing in addition that I've read personally, then that hasn't been said at length in terms of any of the meetings that we've had. Does anyone have anything in addition to what has already been said, mentioned, or discussed to bring forward? And understand that we're definitely going to have a tighter rein on extending the historical. If you have additional information, then we ask that you come forward.
Good evening, members of the board, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Colburn, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Studenroth, Patrick Fife, Toomey Latham, Shea, Kelly, Dubin, and Quateraro here again on behalf of the Chifras and the Stevens, the two adjacent property owners. I did make a submission earlier today that did contain some summary, but there was new information in that I would like to discuss and I think is important and very relevant to not only the application, but some of the observations and statements that Mr. Studenroth made in his report. I did include new articles from the Department of the Interior that were not previously provided. They were taken from the Department of Interior's website. And I think when all is said and done, they put a number of things that were in Mr. Studenroth's report in context. I think a few things just that can't be ignored in terms of the history of the house, obviously the size of the addition. I know that, but in terms of what is new and what you cannot ignore as a board, and the information I provided, it strongly disfavors the applicant's attempt to reintroduce. You have to let me make my.
No, I don't have to, and I was very specific, both with the applicant's presentation as well as anyone else that spoke. Anything in addition to what's that has not been part of the various applications prior, that be added, but the historical is not necessary.
No. I'm talking about the applicant's attempt to reintroduce these rooming house wings as part of the addition. And Mr. Studenroth's report didn't focus at all on that, and we found information from the Department of the Interior that speaks specifically to that. And in particular, there's an article, it's Exhibit B to our most recent letter, the one that we handed in today. And again, I'm apologizing for giving it to you today, given the compressed time frame of last week. I wasn't in the office every day, and we had a 2-week turnaround. But I think it is very important to briefly discuss, and I'm only asking for a few minutes. But specifically, this is an article from the Department of the Interior called New Additions to Historic Buildings. And it says, quote, even though buildings may be of historic character, rather than architectural significance, it's their tangible elements that embody its significance for association with specific events or persons, and it is those tangible elements, both on the exterior and interior, that should be preserved. Now, I think it's undisputed that these temporary rooming house wings were not historically or architecturally significant. There's been no mention of that to date, and they're not associated with any specific event in the village's history. I think the February 12th report from Mr. Snodgrass that was handed to me at the last hearing, I didn't have an opportunity to review it, so I'd like an opportunity to comment on that as well. He echoed a similar concept in his report. He urged for the restoration of, quote, important architectural features that are missing. In fact, he says when an important architectural feature is missing, its recovery is always recommended in the guidelines as the first or preferred course of action. There's been no statement by the applicant or anyone else that these prior rooming house wings that they're now trying to replicate were important architectural features.
But I don't think they were trying to replicate them, and that's all, everything you're saying now was in the information you've given us this afternoon, isn't it?
And again, I think I'm entitled to speak to that information.
Well, you submitted it as part of the actual file, so we do have that information. It's.
I would like to let him at least speak. Please, Curtis. Everyone else has spoken.
I think the public is.
No, everyone has. I'm sorry.
I'd like to hear what he has to say. That's my.
Okay, that's your opinion. Jeff, do you?
Well, inasmuch as the applicant is asking us to close it to the public, and the public is, you close.
I stayed on my record. I'm not trying.
This is the dialogue that we were trying to avoid, because there's a lot of information that's been given, a lot of which is being, again, replicated this evening and also been put into the file this afternoon. And what happens all the time is we get information given to us in writing, and then you want to present it in addition to that, and it becomes an overwhelming application.
I'm merely, well, I think in terms of the applicant adjourning this 7 times and repeatedly putting in plans, I'm merely just offering the opportunity to give you a compressed version of what's in my letter. It's very short.
Well, there were two. Christina, there were two board members that wanted to hear additional information about what the, additional presentation from the from council here for the neighbors. It's kind of repetitive from what we've heard in the last meeting. Do you feel that it's something that you want to continue to read? Have you read the information that was been given this evening, and do you believe that you understand that information?
I have read the information that came in this afternoon. If you have something that you need to discuss about it that's new, I would like to hear it, but I don't want you to read to me what you've already given me.
And I'm not reading to you verbatim what I've already given. I'm reading a couple of quotes to put it into context, and I'm simply, again, this is not information I presented at the last hearing. I'm not here to do that. I understand that you don't want that. I respect that. I agree. But I do think I'm entitled to speak, at least to what I just submitted, in summary fashion, and I think it's important for the public to hear it as well.
If it can be done relatively efficiently, I wouldn't mind hearing the summary for my benefit and the public's benefit. I did see the materials, I've read through them, but for a few minutes.
So it's a democracy. We just ask that you please leave.
I promise to do it efficiently. I'm probably almost halfway done with what I had. I think what I wanted to get at is a really second crucial point that I think the applicant and I think Mr. Studenroth in his report have overlooked. And this, I think this is crucial. There's a quote it's Exhibit C to our letter. It's Preservation Brief number 17 from the Department of the Interior's Technical Preservation Services. It says, quote, "A new addition should also respect the architectural expression of the historic building type. For example, in addition to an institutional building, should maintain the architectural character associated with this building type, rather than using details and elements typical of residential or other building types." Here, the applicant's plan proposal does just the opposite. They are proposing, in addition to a residential building, but they're using the architectural character and details associated with the building's prior use as a rooming house. I think
I'll have to stop there. The applicant, and as well as in the presentation, and I think in the beginning of this application, this is what I was fearful of. We talked so much about a period in time that was the spirit of the application, whether it be 1920 or whatever the initial or the prior elevation. We're looking and reviewing this application for its appropriateness, not a replication of a year or a time or a period. How is this application appropriate based on today's standards? And I believe that the applicant, and I believe that it's been said several times, both in presentation and in the prior dialogue in the beginning of this process, that we're not looking at a replication. So I just want to make sure, because that period kept being mentioned over and over again, this is not a replicated application of a prior period, but that period being used as a muse. And
well, they're certainly looking at it for an inspiration. I think those words are abundantly clear, and that's what they're saying is the basis for this additional square footage. Maybe they're not replicating it detail by detail, but I think even all the submissions that they've made, I mean, they try to show you a visual of exactly how it matches up to what was there in 1897. They're clearly using it as a blueprint for what their plan is. And I think the question this board needs to ask is if these wings that existed in those prior photos that they're using for an inspiration were there for a commercial purpose, and that purpose ceased to exist 65 years ago, then why is it appropriate to restore a building today using those?
And I'll say this as to add to the record, that its use then and now would not be if something this board is going to look at in terms of the appropriateness of the designs proposed. We're looking at the totality, the elevations. How will it play in? If it was a rooming house 100 years ago, is irrelevant to today's proposed plan. We're looking at we're looking at the design, and we're looking at the impact of that design today.
Well, I think you need to look at the impact of the design today, but where the applicant is expressly looking at the past for the inspiration to today's design, I think you have to look at what made it look that way in the past. And the reason that it looked that way in the past is because it was a rooming house. They're trying to reintroduce the elements, the inspiration of a rooming house into a residential structure. And that's what this particular passage from the Department of the Interior speaks to, and that is inappropriate. The rooming house wings are simply not relevant to the use or history of Mocamonto as what it's known for and what it's important for as that rare surviving country house that started the summer colony here in Southampton. I think including a rooming house addition or something that's inspired by the rooming house gives that false impression, that false interpretation that Mr. Studenroth spoke to, that the standards shouldn't allow to happen. And it does happen as a result of this addition. But more importantly, I think also when you get into the standards themselves and you get into the Department of the Interior's interpretation of its own standards, which are specifically incorporated by reference into the village code, but I would just urge that, and I'm not going to repeat everything that was in my prior submissions.
But you're starting to now. You started. You started repeating, and I'm sorry. I'm trying to be fair, but at the same time, again, we have your information. We've read it. And I understand you want to present it as a part of your presentation, but we're still going to take time to review this application. We're still going to take time because I'm sure that we have a board member that needs to be brought up to speed. We have other board members that have questions. We just received this evening. Let's take a look at what the information, I think every board member had the opportunity to read it, but having you present it.
It just came into the web. I just got it this afternoon, so I've glanced at it, but I would not say I've read it.
So I do think, if you can be heard on just two more short points, and I'm almost done. I do think that it's unfortunate that Mr. Studenroth's February 7th report was issued without the benefit of the public's opportunity to provide any substantive comments on the applicant's plans.
Well, I'll say this: the reason why his presentation his report was provided and not spoken on until this meeting here, giving the people, individuals in the community the opportunity to read it, to come back before this meeting this evening. If there's some substance information to discuss about his report, then that's something new. But if it's a part of what you've already written in your report this evening, I prefer to hear those that are speaking about new material that they haven't had the opportunity to speak.
Well, again, I think what I submitted does respond to his report, and I simply want the opportunity to speak about it. And I do think that there was material that Mr. Bennett's office submitted today, a FOIL response that his office had submitted to the village. I was sent a copy by email today by Ms. Larkin that said that they were asking it to be made part of the record, which I don't have any objection to.
I never received the FOIL. Did we get a FOIL request today?
Yeah.
Today?
There were materials that the applicant had.
A week ago.
Right.
Had submitted a FOIL request, and those materials were now, at the applicant's request, asked to be made part of the record on this proceeding. Is that correct?
All they are is, I asked for, you want me to respond or not?
No.
Okay.
No.
That's fine. That's fine with me, actually. That's fine.
But it is correct that there were materials that were submitted, and as part of that, there was in fact statements from Mr. Studenroth himself that said he issued his report. It was based on, in part, the notion that the neighbors, that we believe that the applicant, quote, can't enlarge the house at all. And what we've provided you, the plans that we've submitted.
Could you please show me, and I don't recall, I've never thought that, so I don't recall writing it. I have my report here.
Yeah, sure.
Are we talking about FOILed information?
I think that should be
That should be separate from the discussion, and if he's talking about FOIL information that was given to you as part of his email request or any...
It was given to the applicant, and it was given to me as well, and the applicant has made it part of the record on this proceeding.
Are you trying to create a frame of mind from...
I'm trying to simply provide for the board that...
This is feeling like a court case, and I don't...
It's like a court case. I feel like we're on trial.
No, but I think suffice it to say that in the letter that I glanced at, there is some question about the process. And I don't think the process has to be debated now, but I think in whatever venue it takes place, the process has to be reviewed.
Which process?
I'm not going to go into Curtis. It's in that document. If you want to hear new business from Patrick, it's part of his new business. But I don't think it's worthy of the public hearing in this venue. But I think it needs to be addressed at some point.
I'm simply reading, there was an email from Mr. Studenroth to Ms. Stevenson on February 7th after he submitted his report
private
to this
emails
board.
going back and forth. We're not going to... There are words in communication between the board, and I'm assuming that Ms. Stevenson requested information from our historic consultant to get guidance.
That's
right. So that's...
Right.
I mean, we're...
Correct, but it was provided to the applicant, and the applicant put it in the record in this proceeding. I didn't, the applicant did.
It's probably best, and I'm so sorry for I don't want to usurp your position at all, but I think, and Bo, you can chime in, issues of this should be discussed offline.
I agree with you, absolutely. These are, again, this is sounding more like a court proceeding than it is looking at it as an aesthetic board, trying to give it our time, our talents, and our abilities to give a recommendation.
My point for stating that, and again, the applicant put these documents in the record, is that the process that was employed here, where Mr. Studenroth's report was issued without the benefit of the applicant's opportunity to submit certain information, including the proposed alternative plan that we put in, which I think is the plan that provides a realistic and historically appropriate addition. I know you don't want me to get to it in detail, but that is the plan. And
it's not about not wanting you to get to it. And my comments have been specific. If you have new material, new items to discuss, which were not part of the information you provided to us this afternoon, then provide that. But it seems like you're going back into this material that you discussed prior.
I certainly am discussing the material that I submitted to the board today, and I think I have a right to discuss that in a public forum, in a public hearing, and that's merely what I'm looking to do. The public shouldn't have to go and search for the letter.
That's what a FOIL process is about. I asked them to channel the board with regards to additional information that's been. Well, I'm just saying the public has a process. It's a FOIL request to look through a file if they wish to do so. We also have a process which is this evening, hearing your information, providing your detailed, giving presentation for both applicant and the public and the community. This board has the discretion to decide on the type of information and if they need to hear your presentation on top of what's been read. That's all I'm saying this evening. And it seems that the board overall said that they would listen to additional information other than material that has already been given to us.
Correct.
And we're going around in circles.
No. My comment about the foiled materials, these are things that came in. The applicant submitted them this afternoon about 3:30 or 4 o'clock today. This is not something that I submitted. It's not something that's in my letter. And it's merely pointing it out because it illustrates the fact that when Mr. Studenroth issued his report, he did not have certain information made available to him, including that the neighbors most certainly were not against any addition at all and that they would not support any addition. He did not have the benefit of looking at the plans that I think it's relatively unprecedented where you have a neighbor put in.
Given the information now, he's been allowed this evening to give his report and testimony on what was being presented, what was presented at the prior meeting. Nothing has changed. So with the addition of the information that's been given this evening, which he was allowed to read and able to see, he's given his report. There's nothing changed. Is there something further that you want to add? Have you had a change of mind, or is there a change in your way of thinking on the application, Zach? I'm just trying to do the best I can to keep this application as organized, as structured as possible. We've gone beyond that in prior meetings into 4 hours of repetitive discussion, and that's what I'm trying to avoid this evening.
Respectfully, I think I would be finished by now. I'm nearing the end.
But you're reading to us from what you've given us.
I am not.
And we've seen your plan.
I'd like to just move on in terms of the fairness of the process, and I think what I have pointed out in my letter, and I hope you would see, is also that there were substantial communications between Mr. Studenroth and Mr. Snodgrass during the course of his evaluation of this application.
As there were between Mr. Studenroth and his expert. So what are we doing here? What does this have to do with anything
it
before
does,
this
yes.
board?
There was one communication between Mr. Foster and Mr. Studenroth.
Yeah, I understand. Again, we're getting back to a court proceeding that this should never become. I'm asking, is there anything further, other than what's been mentioned this evening, other than any FOIL request that has been part of any communications between either a board member or a person in the community or the applicant? Is there anything with regards to additional information not provided this evening?
Beyond what I submitted, I have no further information to provide you. My last request, though, is that you go back to the beginning and you look at Exhibit F to the first letter we submitted before the November hearing. And it's the Department of Interior's guidelines with respect to new additions. It's their preservation brief on that issue. And I quoted a number of passages which I think are very relevant to the nature of what's being proposed relative to the existing structure. And it's just simply too big, too much mass, too much size, too much volume. And I think if you look at the guidance that the Department of the Interior gives, interpreting its own standards, I think you have no choice but to deny the application as currently presented.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry if I was rude or obtuse in any manner, but it's just that we have been on several meetings hearing the same information over and over again. We're just trying to keep it as streamlined as possible. We have substantive information over the course of the meeting. So any additional public comment? I'm sorry.
I believe my clients would like to give some additional comment.
Any information other than has already been discussed this evening or prior meeting?
No paper.
I get that.
Give me a couple of minutes. How much? Whatever.
If you start becoming repetitive, I will have to
try not to be repetitive.
He put in an affidavit today. I'm not responding to it. What are we doing here?
What comments do you have? Please, if you can keep them.
Well, first of all, Mr. Studenroth and I have not communicated about this.
What's on the communications?
I was accused by Mr. Bennett of communicating. We have not communicated about it. We've said hello at this meeting in public. That's it. We never mentioned Mocamonto.
Okay.
Second, I have to say he was wrong in his report today on the fact that the facades of Mocamonto, 3 of which are not original. The original Mocamonto is missing only the 12.5-foot north wing, which was a bedroom. The south facade is essentially the same as it was. It was changed 50 years ago and changed back again a little bit. The east facade obviously is the same, and the west facade with the Tiffany windows, those Tiffany windows in that part were added in the 1880s, not after that. It was like 85 or 86, they're photographs. I wrote about 3 or 4 different topics of relevance, including the length of the building that was discovered last week. But I think that the most important part is the last section describing Mokomato as the most influential building in Southampton in the last 150 years. It's the building, because of its architecture, is so radical. It was made people talk about it and drew people and a certain type of person to Southampton, and they were the people that made the historic district now. And we would not have this same kind of historic district if it weren't for Mokomato. It's a very important building, and it needs to be treated with care and with having an addition on it that is the right scale so that it has its sensibility inside and out. That's what I have to say.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. Any additional public comment?
I'll try to make it brief, but since I'm the neighbor, I'm Joyce Jifra. I'm here to represent my husband and my 3 children, also for the benefit of your new member of your board. We just want to reiterate that this is obviously a very important application to think about the future of the historic district. And imagine if the footprint of every historic house in the village were increased by nearly 80%. Just as a matter of personal perspective, too, for the new member here, I have attended every single meeting of this board and nearly every meeting of the ZBA, which has been 11 in total. Mr. Fox has only attended 1 of these, and we're extremely invested in the future of this project and the future of the village. The board should not approve Ken's current plans simply because he's proposing something less than his original plans, which would have increased Mokomato footprint by more than 200%. By any measure, his current plans still go too far, and just because he's reduced the size of his plans, that doesn't mean these plans are reasonable. He still seeks to increase Mokomato's length facing Lake Agawam by 98% and the footprint by 79%. At hearing after hearing, we've seen new plans for the first time at this hearing. Ken hasn't sent these plans to us in advance, and as we have asked, and we hope in the future that the board will not permit this kind of proceeding. We were also very dismayed when the board's historical consultant, Mr. Studenroth, issued a report without hearing the public, including the immediate neighbors. Mr. Studenroth just spoke with Mr. Fox's representatives, and this wasn't right. My husband and I were dismayed when Mr. Bennett told members of the ZBA he believed that 2 members of this board supported Ken's latest plans and 2 members did not. I've been at all of these hearings, and I've never heard a vote as of yet.
And there weren't any.
Well, we're concerned about ex parte communications between Mr. Bennett and this board, which certainly wouldn't be fair. In evaluating
I have to stop you there. There has been no communication, for the record, there has been no communication between myself, and I'm going to ask the board, has there been any communication between any board member and counsel for either the applicant or counsel for the objector?
No.
No, but nor was she saying about board members. So, no, this board member has not.
No. No.
No. Okay. Both sides, applicant and objector, correct?
Yeah.
I have not had any communication, nor the applicant.
Well.
Part 2, has there been any communication between the applicant, not just counsel, but the applicant or neighbors on this application by any board member? Jeff? Well, there's been conversations.
Here's what I'll tell you. I don't talk anything about this case to anybody because I want to keep this totally transparent. So the answer to any of your questions regarding this is no.
Susan, have you had any conversation with the applicant?
I don't actually think your question is appropriate, Curtis.
You don't have to answer, I just asked the
Okay,
question.
I'm not going to answer.
Okay. Have you had any communication with either the applicant or neighbors?
No.
I have not either. See.
Thank you, let me proceed. If Ken wanted a bigger house, he should have bought a house on a bigger parcel of land. The board should take into account all of the public opposition to the plans, including from the Southampton Association, the Peconic Baykeeper, the Group for the East End, and the Agawam Conservation Association. Almost 1,300 people have now signed our online petition objecting to Ken's plans, and these include a number of people.
So so that I understand, you're objecting because you believe the house is being increased in volume.
Correct.
So that's the crust of your argument.
Well, also, as you've heard from Mr. Foster and Mr. C-Mac Sammy, who's included a proposal of what we think is reasonable, as was submitted this afternoon. We also have, as you well know, architectural concerns about the design that's been submitted as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just for the record, understand that this board, and I've said it before, and I think we've said it several times, this board's responsibility is not to redesign any application, but in addition to that, because we see that there have been other elevations, or alternative elevations drafted, we'll look at all alternative elevations. However, it's not the responsibility of even the neighbors to design neighboring homes. Making suggestions being one, but having the sole responsibility to say, this is the design that you should use, that's not something that it would be the responsibility of the community. We would look at it from just informational purposes to see if it's appropriate. Our review on our application is appropriateness. Any further public comments?
I'm not even bringing paper with me. I'm just coming up. And I'm not going to do anything but just
You
come
take
up
your time.
for 30 seconds. Whitney Stevens, representing our family. No, it's okay, because I'm going to be super quick. 468 First Neck Lane, adjacent neighbors to Mr. Fox. Two things I just want to make incredibly clear.
Are
Number
they
one,
in addition to what's already been said?
I just
or
want
prior?
to, I'm going to reiterate something that is true, but we are not opposed.
I've been more than fair.
We're not
I've been more
opposed.
than fair over the last few meetings.
Yeah, you have been, but I just want to finish this one thought. Number one, just want to make certain that you all understand we are not opposed to a reasonable addition. We are just asking the simple question as whether or not the one that is before us at 40 feet is reasonable or not. We believe it is not, and this impacts us and Southampton, but us directly. It's the activity, it's the common driveway, it's our private cove that we have with our 4 neighbors and that we share, and just want to make certain that you understand we're not opposed to something reasonable.
I didn't get the activity.
Well, if you had the bigger the home and the more the mass increases, the more activity in our little private cul-de-sac. There are 4 homes there now. Obviously, when this home was originally built, there was only 1. And the more activity going up and down the driveway, this affects each and every one of us. And I just want you to understand as a neighbor that the activity level is meaningful to us. The more the size goes up, the greater the activity as a neighbor, number 1. Number 2, I just have to go on the record and say, process-wise, I don't understand the process. I don't understand how somebody can come in with a more than double size home and then little by little cut away at it and get to something which quote unquote is reasonable. And the place that it's most reasonable is in reference to the original plan that was submitted how many months ago, and then it's not necessarily reasonable with respect to Mocomonto. And I just would ask each one of you, really just look at Mocomonto today, look at the extension, and just believe that that extension is something that is subservient, reasonable, and respectful to that home. And I've said this a couple times, I know it, but I'm really struggling with the process of starting with something so enormous and then little by little cutting it away so suddenly miraculously it looks reasonable. From our perspective as neighbors, it does not. And that's all I'm saying. But as you can hear,
I actually think that, and this has happened on many applications where we've had a difference of opinion, and there have been recommendations of this board, and there have been reductions done. And I think that's part of a good process, where if something's out of keeping and out of scale, or we feel such, there's a reduction and there's a compromise by the applicant. So I don't see that as being
the idea that you would encourage people to come in, right now, what was proposed originally was basically more than double the size of what is being done now. So therefore, it makes what's being done now look incredibly reasonable. And all I'm asking for you to do as a board, very simply, as you can hear, I don't even have a voice tonight. I'm just asking you to please think about the home that's there today, and think about if it is just, we know it's a historic, important home. I will not belabor that point, but is the addition and the wing that is being spoken about truly reasonable in the context of, clearly Mr. Studenroth believes that it is, but for those of us who've been very close to this process as well, and we've listened and read all the materials, we just want to make sure that you're looking at it based on the home that's there today, not a process which is basically edited down to where we are today.
Just a comment,
and that's all.
just a quick comment, because you made the reference, and I just want to make sure I understand, because you mentioned about activity. It's part of the issue, a challenge in the increase volume of the house, that more people would be there, be more entertainment, and therefore,
Yes.
okay.
I know that's not you.
I want to make sure it's part.
I know that's
part
not
of the record.
you.
I want to make sure you understand.
But we're also
it's not our responsibility to
we went
police
from
the activities on the property.
But also, likewise, we went from an 8-acre parcel that had the home originally on it. We're now down at, basically 2 acres. It's a very, or even less, it's a very, very different process today, and a different cul-de-sac today than when the home was originally built. And as the wing is being put under consideration for that, I just think it's important that the wing be considered in the context of that, and also in the context of the fact that in the end, what matters is not what went before, but where Mocamonto is today and what is being ultimately done to it. And that's all that I'm asking.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Give some time. Is there any additional comment? We can give a couple of minutes. Any additional comments?
Thank you.
Okay. This has been talked over. It's been labored over. I don't want to shorten, Rob, your opportunity to hear more or move any further. Is there anything further you think you said you had questions? I'd like for you to have the opportunity to voice those questions.
I do have a few questions. They're really just factual questions having to do with the latest plans that I've had a chance to review. And forgive me if some of this has been covered. I didn't see it in the record, so I may have missed it. There's a breakfast area that is in the addition, but it's not recessed, I believe. That first 10 or 12 or 14 feet. And I'd just like, from an architectural perspective, to understand why that wasn't recessed as the rest of the addition is. What was the thinking behind that on the east elevation? If there's, is Lisa, or is there an architect? Yeah, she's not here.
Well, Lisa's not here, but the concept.
Can you hear that, Charlie?
Almost.
Okay.
Lisa's not here, but Joel Snodgrass, the historic consultant.
Hi, Joel
I've seen you on
Snodgrass.
tape, so I feel like I know you. All of you. I feel like
Obviously, I can't speak for Lisa, but I did talk to her about this, and part of it was not only
If you
trying
could just bear with us, please. If there's any comments or discussion between the two, anyone in the audience, if you could please take it in the hallway. I can't hear, and we can't hear what the applicant or person is presenting. Sure, present.
Again, I can't speak on Lisa's behalf, but I can at least reflect what I believe her intentions were, because we did speak about this, and that was it's partially programmatic, meaning she's trying to fit things in there in terms of traffic flow through the house and so on, and also partially, I think she's trying to further emphasize the differences. So actually, it is set back slightly, but not to the same degree, and so the point of this was to try to actually have a greater effect of differentiation. So she was intentionally trying to build that in. I mean, part of what we talked about at great length is, and I know there's been discussion about, are we mimicking it? So we're clearly, as has been said over and over again, trying to draw inspiration, reference, obviously. And on that note,
the concept of is it appropriate or not was really driven by the fact of it's the site's history. It was there for somewhere between 41 to 55 years. That's not insignificant. That's not temporary. It's actually substantial. So that's really where it was coming from.
My concern about it just has to do with the fact that that is the transition from the existing house and the basic historic house into the addition. And in terms of separating it visually, you have stepped back. She has stepped back the rest of the house. And I was just curious as to why not step back. It looked to me, and I'm not going to talk about programming, but if it was driven by programming, it looked on the plan that was submitted, the floor plan, that there might be room for a breakfast nook if that were pulled back in. And I just wonder, I should maybe, Curtis, for everyone here, let you know, these are some very specific questions, and not that I feel I know the rest of the brief, but I want to fill in a few dots so that I can understand those few dots.
As I said, I did ask her and say, what was the reason behind this and so on, and her comment immediately was, it would not fit unless I had placed it where it was.
And it is set back. It is set back. It is not flush.
It's
correct,
not,
yes, it's not flush.
But not much, 6 inches of
correct. My understanding was that it actually was necessitated by the space usage and so on.
Okay. I don't know if there's been a specific discussion of the 3 doors on the east elevation as part of the new addition. Just wondering, and I've seen the floor plan, so I know what's going on programmatically inside. I can understand why someone would want them, but from the outside, in terms of windows, there are doors on the porch on the first floor. Why 3, and why is one of them stuck to the far north side so that the staircase is not floating as the other staircases do on the porch?
Well, again,
you can't.
I can't speak.
I'm sorry that Lisa's not here. But
what I will tell you, though, is part of my discussions with Lisa was really trying to draw upon historic precedent and what was there, what would be appropriate, and so on. And that did come up about, where are you placing things and for what reasons and so on. And part of it was trying to look at the breakup of the porch and the lattice in terms of relationships to doors and windows and sort of peeking through, if you will, that facade. The historic use of the building, as actually has been pointed out by Mr. Foster, was there were a number of doors that existed in this, in what was the boarding house wing, and that's related to previous use. So in some ways, it was a very nice coincidence to be able to actually draw upon that, because that is actually the history of the building. Is there were a number of entrances into the building.
We'll take a look at most of those things.
Okay.
But again, I have to let Lisa speak specifically.
Okay.
But thank you. It's helpful.
Any further?
No other questions? Is there going to be other discussion, or are there other?
You're on the roll, and I'm very impressed. Very impressed. Are there any other comments specifically?
Well, I can share some other thoughts, I think, just to be transparent about it. One thing I should mention is that I've actually been in the house. I don't know Mr. Fox. He doesn't know me, I don't believe, except maybe now by name. But I work with the Southampton Historical Museum on their house tour every year. And the house was on the house tour 2 years ago, 2 summers ago, I believe. And I was, by coincidence, I was assigned as the house captain for that house. So I was in charge of the docents for that. So I've had a chance to see the inside of the house. And for those who don't know me, and I don't need to, I don't want to get into this too much, but I've restored an historic house. And there were certainly some compromises from my original plan. And so with that in mind, and I have spent time not only on this file, but on some other sort of foundational matters for this board, I guess I just wanted both. I could put you on the spot. I want to understand that with respect to the Department of Interior standards that have been incorporated, that have been mentioned many times in the record, but also sort of are in a way incorporated by reference, I understand that that is not a you shall do, but it is a you shall consider. In other words, I was wondering if you could maybe just help me interpret this term, what the shall consider mean.
I think this is the place to do it, but there's a hierarchy.
Yeah.
And it's pretty obvious. Okay. There's a code, there's references, and there's input that you need. How much weight you want to give to any one factor or any one guideline or reference is part of your deliberation process, and it would depend on what part of the project you're talking about. Obviously, a location with door is not as significant as the total width of the addition, right? So, there's a process there.
And the only other, I guess, question, maybe, Zach, if I could pose one to you, it has to do with this question of the additions that were put on and the usage that they had, which was as we've heard, as boarding houses primarily.
Right.
I've heard that characterized as being somewhat either commercial or institutional use, but one of the first things that strikes me a little bit is that a boarding house is actually a form of residence.
Residential, correct.
But I don't know what form of residence they were at the time they were done. Who was coming to these boarding houses? For me, this is relevant in understanding whether this is a good or bad or neutral architectural reference to have.
I think it's a great and very interesting historical reference because that's what was happening in that period. We know, for example, that several other Betts houses built by the brother were built specifically for rental purposes.
40 Meadow.
For example. So in terms of the character or the style of how it was built, they were built for residential purposes, not commercial. They were rented, so income was derived, but they were not built as commercial. They were not built in a commercial style or an institutional style. They were residential. And so if we look at the pictures, you can see that the detailing, the architectural detailing, which has relevance today, did carry forward that which was there so that the windows matched and the roof line and all that sort of thing. And I think it's, to your point, it's important to realize that that whole era was an extremely important one to the history of this village. And that's really how things built up. People would come and rent either a house or several rooms and get the experience of being here. And if after several summers they had the means and the interest, they then evolved into maybe buying a place of their own or building it. That was a natural evolution. And it was typical of all of these coastal villages. That's how they grew from the 1870s after the railroad arrived up through the 1920s and 30s. So my feeling is that those two wings are just as much a part of the history of the house and the property. They're not characteristic of how it was built to begin with, but they're certainly very much a part of the history. We don't get to choose which piece is historic and which one isn't so historic. It's really the totality of how the building evolved. So I think it's an important aspect of it.
The other thing I might add to that is it was built in 1897. That's less than 2 decades from its original construction. And unfortunately, you did not see maybe you're fortunate to have not seen the spreadsheet that I produced.
I've seen the spreadsheet.
So you can see that it is so complicated in terms of what went on there. And that's what was the whole reason for this, was trying to show the complexity of what had changed, some of it very, very early on. So, the history of the site was changed even within its first 2 decades, and those additions were made less than 20 years, 17 years after it was, in theory, produced. And then it existed for possibly up to 55 years in place. That's more than twice as long as when it wasn't there. So, I look at it as, and I'm coming from the same angle of, boarding house use actually is it's a quite significant thing. And actually, maybe this site more than anything, it illustrates the cause to add those additions and then take them away because they were used as the period was waning and then used for a different purpose. Possibly another financial gain, but a different purpose. So it's actually quite illustrative in terms of the site's history.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you were able to also show that you have, in fact, done research in the application. I appreciate you doing the due diligence before coming into this meeting. It's a complicated application, so don't have to worry about that.
We'll talk to this about these things. Thank you.
Thank you. Where I see where we're at right now is we have there's an objective to the application because of the mass and the appropriateness and the amount of volume that this particular application has, as well as possibly potentially not in keeping architecturally and historically from the objectives, and we have the applicant who brings in another design. Is there any additional designs, any other elevations, any changes, any adjustments, any further renderings or that you wish to propose based on information or dialogue that's been mentioned this evening or prior?
No. I think that that the fact, well, I guess it depends upon what the board's pleasure is procedurally. What is your intention this evening? Are you going to close the meeting?
You had some questions with regards to specific architectural, just questions. You didn't mention there were concerns or issues, but do you feel that you need time to get the true or answer from the architect to have a deeper dialogue? Do you believe that what's being proposed has could be better presented? Or do you have any other comments about what?
I just wish, knowing what I know now, I'd been involved a little sooner, just so that I wasn't in any way holding things up. Because I do have just some concerns on some of the scale, but probably to some of the apparent massing of the east elevation, particularly on the northern edge of it, and some of the detailing related to that. But with Lisa not here, yes.
I think it's important at this point, though,
Please. Guys, address the board. I know, don't respond to, I want everyone just to please address the board.
I sat here for an hour and 15 minutes.
You got your response.
Just in terms of the context generally and how you approach these things, we've tried to be very, very malleable in this long process, but overriding it are a couple of facts. One, this is not in the public trust. This house. This is not something that the village owns. It's not like the Mercator Cooper Kendrick house, which, by the way, is one of the only 4 structures in this village on the National Historic Register. The Stanford White house on Hill Street, and 2 others. Please, give me some latitude.
I've given everyone latitude this evening.
No, I've spoken for.
I've given everyone latitude over the last several months.
No, but I'm asking.
I'm just asking you specifically. Are you asking this board to? What exactly?
I'd like to address, for the benefit. I'd like Mr. Coburn to hear just some of the 4 or 5 salient issues that I think govern this.
John, we're not there anymore. We've got to move on with this. You know,
that's fine with me.
I've had a lot of questions answered by colleagues.
Do you want to hear
That's
Lisa
fine.
or not?
That's fine.
She's the architect.
Yeah, no, I know. No, I don't need to. I don't need to.
Thank you.
Okay.
Do you feel you're in a position to close the application for further deliverance, and then we instruct council what our final vote is overall? I'm going to ask each board member individually, so I'm starting with you because you're the new board member.
And that would mean what
So
precisely?
close the application, allow for some time for written comment from the public for further, whether it be presentation. I don't just giving some time for council to present even more information, because more dialogue and detail was given this evening, and and then present before council in 60 days or 90 days.
30 days.
I think I'm asking for the April 23rd meeting to prepare the decision. If you close it tonight and give it a 10-day response period for any further comments.
10-day response period. Okay. That would be the. I'm sorry?
I would feel comfortable with that.
Christina? Susan?
There are some issues of procedure that are in this document that I think need to be discussed within the board, if not publicly. So I don't know where that leaves me.
Well, if it's a procedure manner that affects the decision, or procedure manner in which moving forward.
It may affect certain elements that were entered into the record. Read the thing.
I read that. I didn't see that. But are you saying yes or no?
Your answer is no. Is that what you're saying?
No, I guess I don't know. I don't know what to say, but I do feel that there's a procedural matter that needs to be addressed that has to do with expert information that's been given to us.
Okay.
Right.
That I find disconcerting. I don't know what to think about it at this point, but it has been introduced, and it needs to be addressed by us. It really does. I feel it does, or I'm not able to vote.
I would object to closing it for a number of reasons. I'd also like to have my comments heard by my fellow board members, in as much as when these things are closed, what I find happens is debate ends. And deliberation, although we're entitled to deliberate as a board, you've told me, it ends. And there are suggestions about alternative designs. There are questions about submissions, not the process, but the actual submissions and the content. And so I'm not ready to close it, and I'd like a few minutes to have my comments heard, because we have a new board member. We rarely have a chance to deliberate. So I'd like to share with you my thoughts, and I'd also like this not to be closed.
Okay, what are your thoughts?
Okay. Well, this has been a dynamic and educational process. We began it in November, and while I may be facing you, really most of these comments are from my fellow board members, because at the end of the day, it's our vote. As Christina once said to me, these are votes that we have to live with for the rest of our lives, and I'm particularly concerned about this property. It's been a dynamic and educational process. It began in November, 4 months of public meetings, 6, and then the ZBA, of course. There were 12 hours of public disclosure, 500 pages of documents and drawings. And there have been a lot of historical learnings and discovery behind this jewel of Southampton, as it's been called. I've learned a lot, and what I learned was it did evolve over time. It evolved and then returned. It was originally designed and scaled as a single-family residence in a very bucolic pastoral setting. And in his first report, Zach made a point of mentioning a Sag Harbor article which said, quote, "The house is a classic early summer cottage." Zach then went on to say the house exemplifies a rare group of surviving dwellings on eastern Long Island that represent the important transition from the earlier boarding house era into more formal and later country house period. Makamonto was designed as a relatively modest seasonal vacation home when compared to the often palatial and typically brick or stone and slated roof mansions of the latter period. The wood-framed, wood-sided Makamonto, excuse my pronunciation, with its wide porches overlooking Lake Agawam, was built for an affluent urban family in an era when vacationing at a summer resort was the primary objective and not that of displaying great wealth through architectural excess as seen in subsequent decades. He goes on to say, Southampton Village is fortunate to include within its historic district a large number of preserved country houses. Makamonto is a significant member of the group, not for its association with a noted architect, nor for the wealth or prominence of its original owner, but rather for its modest scale and unique position in the timeline of country house building on Long Island. Then we go forward, and it becomes a boarding house with a wing, and now it's on 8 acres, and some of the land behind it has houses being built on it. Then, 50 years hence, or following that, it returns to the original design and function. But now it sits on 2 acres, with the removal of that wing, now it sits on 2 acres of houses in relatively close proximity. So where the house that once was is the house that stands there today. Yet we're being asked by the applicant, as the historic board representing the community, to pick a point to step backwards, negatively step backwards historically, to pick out a time that's not representative of what the house was built for and what gave its significance originally in this community. It just makes no sense to me, and it runs counter to the very name and charter of this board. Joel Snodgrass, quoting from his February 12th letter, he says, whether to be preserved as originally conceived versus another time period is a fair question. And he's right, it is a fair question. Of course, depending on whose side of it, and given the applicant, they answer it by returning it to a period of time that suits their needs when it's the largest and probably aesthetically the least appealing proportions. A house which was vertical in nature now has this added wing, functional, and now we're being asked to add back to it because he points out that to go back to preserve the original is something that is reserved simply for museum houses. And to do anything else would negate the importance of the house's evolution and its morphology. But again, it's self-serving to pick out, and even Zach said, we can't choose, I'm sorry, Joel said, I think it was Zach who said, we can't choose the period and go back to. Well, they are choosing the period, and it's not the original house. We've got an original house. We don't have to do anything to preserve it. And yet we're being asked to add on something that makes it not what it was when it was first built.
Are you recommending that nothing be done to the house?
No, I'm not saying that. So we have a house now that is in its preserved state, and I believe it's our responsibility to protect that. But thank you, Curtis, because my next point was, but as a board, we recognize, and Whitney Stevens said it early on, and the neighbors have said it early on, is like us, as a board, we recognize that things change and families do have needs, and that reasonable expansion is possible, so long as it stays within the integrity of the architectural confines and context of the house. The applicant, the one time he was here, Ken Fox, claimed that the expansion was appropriate in size and scale, and it was subservient to the existing structure. I've heard the language in your report, Zach, and I appreciate the parsing of the words, but here's the house as it is. This is the house. To then expand it by 80% in terms of square footage, and then to expand the facade by nearly 100%, to say that this addition is subservient and small boggles the mind. I may not be an architect, but I have eyes. And something that is equal or 80% equal to this is not subservient. It can't be. Mathematically, it can't be. So, this obviously, by my tone and by my words, is not an application that has my approval, nor will it get my vote. I don't believe it satisfies the criteria as specified in 65.5C2, nor does it satisfy 65.5B1, that things should be altered as little as possible. I read that as a layman, and little as possible doesn't mean twice the size, twice the facade. So I don't support this application, and I will not vote for it. However, and this is why I don't want to close the hearing, alternatives have been presented. Alternatives that have a 25-foot addition, and I'm not going to get to the actual numbers, but a smaller addition that is in keeping and will not negatively impact the iconic view from Lake Agawam. So I would wish that the discussion stay open. I would wish that my fellow board members have an open mind and look at this thing from a practical standpoint and from a visual standpoint and make a judgment based on their eyes as much as the code. I would also ask, and it's the applicant's prerogative, that they take that to heart and the neighbors offer, and maybe there is another alternative, whether it's a smaller expansion on the north end, the east-facing side, and maybe an expansion on the non-visible side. There are alternatives. So, again, I think it's worthy of pursuit, it's worthy of preservation, and it surely should not be closed.
I respect your point of view. I respect your comments, and I appreciate it. I wanted to give you enough time to publicly and thoroughly express them. There are your point of views.
Well, like I said, we're all board members.
We're all independent in thought, and we view, obviously, the codes, and specifically, we've been here long enough to know that we view things a little differently with regards to the purview and the oversight of this board, what it can and cannot do. Although in past times, we looked at Zach's reports as being professionally done. He is the professional. He is the historic consultant for this board. He's hired to do so. We have disagreed with him. We've had, even most recently, disagreed with a recommendation that he's made. So don't want to think that everything he says, we've taken to heart and we've moved further on. We've taken it as independent and we've identified what we feel is appropriate. Our responsibility is appropriateness. And within the confines of zoning, within the confines of the building envelope and footprint that's been set forth by the Village of Southampton. If the board wishes to change that, then we'll operate under those parameters or whatever those reduced parameters are. At this time, I think that the applicant, and I've asked several times, does the applicant wish to make any other modifications or any other submissions? The applicant said he does not, so I have to base the appropriateness based on the designs now, and I feel that enough information has been provided to this board to do so.
That's fine, so obviously my vote will not be...
Understood. So at this time, and that doesn't necessarily mean that information between now and we're going to give further opportunity for the community, for even yourself to add to the file if you wish to do so, to help support your way of thinking, help support the community's way of thinking. But it's a 10-day written-in process where the file can be, additional information can be added to the file, material for us to review, in which case, council, you said the meeting of...
April 23rd.
April 23rd?
That is if you close the meeting tonight.
Okay. If for some reason information...
With all submissions to be made by March 8.
March 8.
March 8?
March 8. Close the business.
Okay. Council, for purposes of...
Doesn't give you much time, does it?
More than enough for me.
For purposes of procedure, if information is submitted and the board has a change of view and wants to further discuss this, we have the discretion of reopening the application.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that we recognize that from a procedural standpoint, if information is given between now and March 8th, which changes either the minds of the board in a different direction, we feel we need to further discuss this in an open forum. We have the discretion of the board to open that meeting back, open up the application, and have further dialogue and discussion.
Okay, I'd like to also add to Jeff's commentary that I don't think that enlarging the footprint of the house by 80% and also extending the most public facade by doubling it, that we are adhering to either our ARB standards or to the standards of the Department of Interior, which specifically, I mean, we're talking about the one facade that is the important facade that everyone no one disagrees about that, and this plan doubles it. That just doesn't make sense to me. What rule says that that's okay? Zach and I disagree, and I want it on the record. And making it so much bigger, I agree with Jeff. That's not subservient, and it doesn't. And honestly, I feel that the alternate plan that the CMAC put in the file was not telling the applicant what to do, but showing us that there is a way to increase this house and to modernize it, to expand and modernize it without destroying its the historic facade that is facing the lake, and without increasing the size of it to the extent that it overpowers it. That's all I have to say. I agree with everything Jeff said, too.
Okay. Anything further from the board? Is there a motion to close the application? The motion would be to close the application for written comment from public, written submission from public to March 8th, close the business, and written decision by council by April 23rd, 2018.
Okay, I second that motion.
All right. Motion was by me, was seconded by Christina. Robert?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Nay. I thought you didn't want to close it.
You sure you don't want, I want to make sure you...
Nay. I'm changing my vote. I don't know, I didn't see what Mr. Bennett put in the file, at the last minute. It evidently has something to do.
They haven't
So that I
said-
understand the vote. Are you a...
Nay.
Nay.
And I'm an aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sure there's some shifting, so we're going to give 3 minutes for people to make their way.
I have a copy.